Thank you, Laura. Thank you, dear BBG colleagues. My pleasure to be today here with you. And yeah, I was in the first group and still sweet, warm memories about Vina, about this course. And my pleasure to meet all of you. And I will be happy to take this connection in the future. Be happy to share our experience, and I want to start to share my screen. 1 second, please. Do you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
I prepare for you a small presentation about defense procurement because as a deputy minister, I was in charge in update defense procurement policy, and I was ex-chairman in supervisory board in our defense procurement agency. So it was like a direct experience. And I'm happy to answer all your questions, maybe some comments and open discussion about our experience. I want to start from regulation which we have before full-scale invasion. And it is important to understand that full-scale war started in February 2022. But from 2014, we in under Russian aggression. So we have war, but this war was localized on Donetsk and Lugansk regional. But even like it was a different, definitely other experience which we have now. But even under this Russian aggression, we procure non-lethal needs for army through open tenders in our e-system Prozora. So we using like our regular procedure, open tender, and on that period, it was no any security issue we have not seen. And on that period, only when we procure lethal needs, it was a state secret procurement for us, and we do not use e-system and do not publish detailed report. And for lethal needs, our approach was if we have local producer, it was a direct contract with some regulation which level of margin could be in this contract, and our supplier manufacturer should disclosure all their costs. So Ministry of Defense understand if we're talking about local producer, all their costs and regulate their margin. For foreign suppliers, we use in direct contract too, with no disclosure of cost, because we understand that for import contracts it is much harder, and here is only what we regulate. It is who will export such needs, and we have state-owned special exporters, a state-owned company who make a delivery, who export these needs. Before full-scale war, we have no procurement agency. All demands we procure through Ministry of Defense centralizedly, and our military units, they have a budget, their own budget, so everything was in the center. Market, if you're talking about producers in Ukraine, was weak, and it was, I believe, one of the reasons why we have a weak producers market. It was because of our regulation, because we regulate margin, and Ministry of Defense have full power how to calculate costs, how to calculate margins, and it's not open for market possibility to growing up, to develop their products, to invest in R&D, to attract innovation, and like we have such situation again, I believe, because of procurement policy which we used before. What happened next? When full-scale invasion Russia started, we understand that we couldn't be so open, and again, maybe you know, but maybe it's needs to make small comments. Few first months during February, March, and April, biggest part, not biggest, but quite big part of Ukraine was under occupation. So Russian troops standing close to Kyiv, and it means that like almost 20% of our territory at that moment additionally was under occupation. So it's a great situation that producers who was on this territory stopped. Contracting authority should replace somehow. So it was like moment when try to use some procedure and try to make procurement in a regular way was impossible. That's why first decision of government was to stop any regulation and to allow make all procurement directly, lethal or non-lethal, everything possible procure directly. Only for non-lethal, a little bit early, returns obligation partially published report about such procurement. And what we understand very fast, that all our openness, which we proud a lot before, after full-scale invasion, when Russia like start to attack all our territory by missiles, by drones, and they could destroy any manufacturers in any location, we understand that such openness really bring us a lot of security issue. So we decided previous data partly hide. So we hide information about military units, about their procurements, about some suppliers who supply military units before. And what was important too, I mentioned that before Ministry of Defense disclosure information about costs producers to regulate margin, it was like tough process, a lot of document, because manufacturers should approve this cost, and we decide to do not require cost disclosures anymore. So it was a decision to procure lethal needs after negotiations. So only negotiations, and we not try to check costs, so not to try check margin, because emergency was too high. What important thing which happened on this moment was that we understand that this war, this full-scale invasion, technically, technologically, much different than before we have, and we need a lot of drones. Almost from first day of full-scale invasion, we understand that we need a lot of drones. And on that moment, the government decides that drones will procure Ministry of Digital Transformation. Why not Ministry of Defense? Maybe you asked me, and I think a few reasons happened on this moment. First reason was that Ministry of Digital Transformation was quite active on this field, and they start a lot of volunteers initiative. One of that, it's United 24. It is a huge charity fund, like who advocate our president. And a few first days they collect a lot of money, and like we made a decision. Okay, if we have this additional budget, we could use it for drones. And Ministry of Digitalization supports this fund. So it was the one reason. But next reason, I think even more important, it is our Ministry of Defense. Maybe it is quite normal for people who many years to serve in army. They really not very well digital experience guy. They not really very flexible guy, and they have their own procedure, their own process, standards, and so on and so forth. And if they need to make something in more creative way and try to technologically find some innovation very fast and so on and so forth, maybe they not like the best guy who could do that. That's why in Ministry of Digitalization we have such a guy who very well known with IT, and they technologically much more advanced, and that's why government makes such decision. And on next slide, I will show how this decision really makes game changer in our war. So it was a first step which our government made when full-scale invasion happened. And almost during all 2022, we have no tenders for non-lethal needs, and we have no regulation and any requirements to lethal procurement. But next, we face with a huge scandal. I say it's a X scandal. Why X? Because, and you can see here almost on all this picture, it is our Minister of Defense, Alexei Reznikov. On some moment, our journalists, social society, start to check prices in food procurement. And because prices Ministry of Defense should publish, and they face with the situation that price to X higher in 10 times than we have such price in the market, in the supermarket, even if be honest. And it makes a huge scandal. And in the final of the scandal, minister should leave. And but not only we have new minister, we understand that we should change our rule, because when you makes all procurement in a direct way, it is high risk that some contract will be overpriced, and because especially it is a super sensitive topic, and for society it's a super important that everything should be clear with the defense procurement. It could create a lot of issues, a lot of problem, and even problem with the motivation of armed forces. And after the scandal, government decided to return some procurement in a Prozoro, but it was not to same Prozora that it was before. So we learn this study and understand that we should not open full information. And right now in Prozora we have possibility published information tender about non-lethal needs, but it is allowed to hide some information about allocation for delivery, about some specific which could be connected with the state security, and it is bring possibility still choose suppliers through a system, but to make information security and to not create additional risk. In the same time, we implement in Prozora something very close to DPS, because it's an open tender with the possibility to bid during all period. So new supplier could join anytime, but we from start make this DPS like we make it not a public fully, so public only announcement. And after announcement, supplier could submit proposal, contracting authority could make qualification, and after qualification that could make a call of price. But all this next step not public, and it's bring us possibility to make a tenders with some specific category, for example, drones. In early beginning, we import all drones because on 2022 we have no drones producer at all in Ukraine. And even if you're talking about import, it was a very sensitive information because like many drones we supply from China. And China on that moment tried to avoid supplying Ukraine. A lot of efforts to invest on that, and it was important to not like publish information how many and to with which supply chain we deliver these drones, and but in the same time it was important to have a good price and to be sure that the tender after the tender we really have effective proposal. So we make this a new procedure, and this new procedure really help us a lot with the import. I will talk a little bit earlier about how market, how producer of drones growing up. But now, if you're talking about now, so today we have a lot of producers of drones, and we use DPS, this defense DPS, to procure FPV drones, for example, and like light drones through electronic system. It is to say very important to do not put all money to one company, but to seed money to all market and make possible to growing up producers and build like more sustainable ecosystem. If we're talking about lethal needs, so we still allow direct contract with some restrictions, but it's still a direct contracts. If you're talking about direct contracts for drones with the local producers, we return regulation for margin up to 25%. I will try to explain why it happened, why on one case, like for one weapon, we have no margin regulation, in other we have. Again, it is because this drones procurement makes Ministry of Digitalization, and it was like mostly their position that they need some regulation because regulation could protect them. Again, in Ukraine, issue corruption like very actual. and corruption during the war actually in many times bigger. That's why in our country we have a lot of discussion about do we procure effectively enough? Do it possible that some person, some process do something wrong? And that's why like Ministry of Digitalization was more open to return regulation, and they push return this restriction with a margin. But Ministry of Defense still make a direct contract. What happened additionally, Ministry of Defense set up a procurement agency. First, it was a two separate agency for lethal separately and non-lethal separately. After 1.5 years, Ministry of Defense understands that it's no need to make a separate agency, and now they merged. And now all budget in one agency. And last point that we, Ministry of Defense, start focus on to develop local producers' capacity. And now it's one of biggest our goal. That we should use defense procurement as a way how to develop local producers of military products. So a few key challenges for better understanding our situation. First challenge with, which we face on, it was a scaling of our armed force. When full-scale invasion happened, we have approximately 200,000 people in army, and during a few weeks, number of people in army rising to 700,000, and now it's like approximately 1 million people who serve in armed force. And what happened? Firstly, we have a huge shortage with everything, from first aid kits to uniform, helmet, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, our territory, and what is important, it was a high industrial developed territory, was under occupation. And for example, we have, before full-scale invasion, we have only one producer for body armor. And this producer was under occupation when Russia very fast moved to Kiev. In this case, we have no other local producer who would cover this huge demand quickly. So we what we start to do in this moment, Ukrainian society play a huge role. So many needs was covered by volunteers and charity funds, and we understand that unfortunately it's not covered all needs, and it was super emergency. Some demands was covered. But later we start to receive assistance from partner. Later we start to deliver import and procure import. But it takes, I think, from 2 to 6 months. Huge luck. If we're talking about modern war, it's too huge luck. So first, I think consequences which we should make, it is to try to make supply chain shorter and to secure supply chain. Because if you have only one producer in your country, it means that this producer could be under force majeure, under occupation, was under destroyed, and next you have no possibility to cover these needs. So after these 6 months, we understand that we should invest a lot of efforts to raising a wider number of supplier producers and to focus on a local market. Second interesting challenges, it is technology and first of all drones products, how to procure, how to make possible to cover these needs, because these needs firstly was super huge. And when I think in the end of 22, our president said that next year we will produce 1 million drones in Ukraine, many people laugh, because it was on that moment it looks like something impossible. Now we, I think, produce such number of drones during a few weeks. What was important on that moment, that Ministry of Digitalization, who leading this procurement, they together with trying to attract market, together with help for new supplier, new producers to easily make to access to the army forces, to testing new devices, to sharing expertise, and so on and so forth. They establish acceleration fund, Brave One, and they start to provide grants for new producers who will supply drones and robotic system and electronic warfare to the Force Army. So together with the procurement, they provide the grants. They provide the money for small initiative, and very fast, from zero, we have 200 producers who produce drones. Now we have much more, and sometimes we have discussion in our society that maybe Russian strategy better, because they have only one producer who produced, not only one, okay, a few producers, but like one major product, Shaheds, who they made these Shaheds in a huge number quantity, and it's a big manufacturers, and they could produce a lot. In our case, we have 100 producers with 100 models with like different technology, and which strategy better? I think it's an open question, and history will show which strategy better. But in our case, it was impossible to establish only one with like technology, cheap and effective technology. Again, because if we have only one, it means that this only one producer will destroy it next day, and we will have no anyone. Only if, again, we will build something very deep underground. So our strategy, it's have a lot of, and it's a diversity makes our supply more sustainable. What important next, that this war, as I mentioned before, we understand that previous period was like more sustainable, and the technology came to army not so fast as now. Now technology change rapidly. Every 3-5 months, we understand that we or our enemy have some new technology, and we should adapt. We adapt all the time. And it is super important to make feedback from the battlefield to procurement office super fast. In this situation, we couldn't make like annual planning normally. So some kind of products we plan annually and like procure annually. But if we're talking about technology, again, drones, robotic machine, and other high technology equipment, it is very much important to bring as much as possible new technology to battlefield, and again, in the other way, as much as possible to take feedback if some technology doesn't work anymore. And what we do with that, so now we have central procurement in a defense agency, but we give some budget to military units. And military units, for military unit, our procurement agency create a kind of market. So it's a market only for defense unitary. In this market, it's a E2. It's called dot chain market. In this market, it's Dmytro will show you Prozora market in next presentation. It's like the same. So it's a E2. All military unit could open all products which qualified by defense agency in this market, and they could directly choose product which they want. So in this case, defense agency responsibility to choose product and to choose supplier, and for military units, it's possibility during 5 days directly choose the best solution on the market and have super fast delivery. And we understand that, again, because we have a lot of products, a lot of producers, it really helps to bring technology in the battlefield faster and growing up and pushing our market to find new technology and new products to bring a more effective solution because of this tool. Because when you procure centrally, it's not impossible to negotiate with the 200 producers. But when you negotiate through such market, it is possible, and it really brings additional benefits. So it's all my slides. I hope I follow with the time, and thank you for your time and support Ukraine. Laura, if maybe a question, or after Dmitry, we will answer to the question.
According to the agenda, we actually have half an hour for the questions at the end of the session. So I would highly encourage colleagues, if they have any questions, to mark them and ask them a bit later. And now I would want to say thank you to Nadiya for a very interesting presentation and demonstrating how fast the procurement and the market have to adapt to really challenging situations. Thank you, Nadiya. And now I introduce Dmytro, who will develop on some of the points already mentioned by Nadiya. And Dmytro, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Nadiya, for the really intro to my presentation. But my name is Dmytro Solovei. I'm a Deputy Director of Development at Ukrainian National CPB, State Institution Professional Procurement, or Profesійні закупівлі, because our lawyers insist that we cannot transliterate the name of our institution as Professional Procurement. We should name it Profesійні закупівлі, but in like Latin letters, but we will change that in the future. So I will focus on public procurement for every main state organization apart from defense procurement. And of course, it will cover the whole transformation since the full-scale invasion till today. But at first, I would like to just briefly introduce you the field of public procurement in Ukraine. So public procurement in Ukraine is an area where 30,000 of customers spend public money during the year. Actually, we have some changes year by year because some of the procurements are hidden as military procurement by the armed forces of Ukraine. Some organizations are under the process of reorganization, so it changed year by year, but approximately 30,000 of customers, and by customers I mean organization, they spend public money in the system. The annual turnover approximately 35 billion euros, and this whole sum spent through the system per year, even the procurements under the national thresholds that no need for which to use the electronic procurement system, the contracting authorities needs to report and publish the contract in the system after they conducted a direct purchase. And so you understand it better, approximately 4% of customers, 4% of organizations, they spend 80% of the funds yearly in the system. And one important mention is the entire country, including procurement agencies that Nadiya mentioned earlier, and CPBs, they conduct procurement using one national e-procurement system. Some of you may know that this system is called Prozoro. And just a couple of facts about Prozoro. So Prozoro is open source code for the whole system. So if some countries, I suppose, maybe countries that does not have any procurement system at all, countries are trying to establish the procurement system for their country, they can use the code of Prozoro and develop the law around it and just have the free e-procurement solution for themselves using that code. And Prozoro has open API, which makes it possible to create new services based on Prozoro data, and Ukrainian businesses are taking advantage of that. So we had a lot of side projects that uses Prozoro data to conduct business intelligence, business analysis for different stakeholders. Prozoro is fully electronic submission of tender proposals, and right now is developing to become the fully electronic e-procurement system with needs and with contract execution inside the system. Prozoro has public BI model, which is covered by Transparency International Ukraine. They manage it for 10 years now. And this public business intelligence model allows to analyze procurement from different angles. Every field that we have in the API of Prozoro can be analyzed in public business intelligence model, as well as we have a professional business intelligence model ProBI that is not public because we have a limited number of logins to that system, but it allows you to design the specific dashboards and specific tables to analyze procurement of any organization, or mainly it's used by the public procurement departments and in organization that need to cover a lot of branches or have a lot of procurements during the year. So they need to analyze the efficiency and the KPIs using the visualized analytics. And also those modules, they are used by the journalists and public society, a lot of NGOs who trying to red flag violations that are done by the contracting authorities, and also controlling entities. They also use business intelligence models because it's much faster and easier. Prozoro is two-level hybrid system consisting of central database and 13 right now commercial marketplaces. So in general, Prozoro is just the IT core of the system. It's owned by the government. in the face of Ministry of Economy. So we have the state-owned enterprise ProZorro, who's under the Ministry of Economy, and actually my organization that I represent, we are a CPB also under the Ministry of Economy. So we have our own cabinet, and we also work in ProZorro, not using the electronic marketplace, but right now using our separate web page, as well as anti-monopoly committee, who's in charge of the pre-judicial prosecutions in public procurement, and state audit service, who conducts audits in the ProZorro system as well. And maybe I should mention that to better understand ProZorro, so ProZorro is a backend. If some of you have the IT background, so ProZorro just the large amount of data, and to gain access to ProZorro to participate in the tenders or to announce a tender as a contracting authorities, you should use the private electronic marketplaces who are charging businesses for bids or some percentage from the contract if we talk about CPB instruments, and the rate of those marketplaces that they charge are fixed by the decree of Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, so they can only attract customers based on their customer service and additional tools. Like right now, a lot of them are developing a lot of AI resources that will help, for example, bidders to analyze tenders and contracting authorities to prepare the tender documentation. So such approach allows to make developments in the system for customers much faster and sometimes much better. What challenges country faces when the Ukraine, in my example, comes to war? So as Nadiya already mentioned, every emergency situation questions the benefits of using competitive procurement in Ukraine. Since 2016 till 2022, we had like the already established and normally function the procurement system with, by European standards, pretty low national thresholds, and everyone in the country already got used to using competitive procurement. But after the 24th of the February 2022, the competitive procurement and the obligatory and mandatory usage of ProZorro was stopped. And 18 months later, in October 2023, percentage of money being spent via competitive procurement in ProZorro reached 80%. So it's like almost the same percentage that was before the invasion. And in my presentation, I will mainly focus on how did Ukraine achieved it. So the main thing that helped to achieve that is the resolution of Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine number 1178. And I'm happy to share with you that when Nadiya said that we tried to do something, we established, we done this and that, it's literally we, because at that time Nadiya was Deputy Minister of Economy who was in charge of designing this decree of Cabinet of Ministers that allowed competitive procurement to return to ProZorro. So in October, almost 4 years, this like 3.5 years from now, the government developed new rules of public procurement under martial law. I mentioned the key takeaways from that changes. So this resolution made open tender with special features. By the system design, it was based on the open tender that we had and very similar to the open tenders that many European countries use, but with shortened terms and with slightly changed thresholds. So thresholds for commodity applied under the features were set at 2,000 euros approximately, because till today, we are setting our threshold in Ukrainian currency, hryvnias, but right now we are awaiting for the new public procurement law to be voted in the Ukrainian parliament at the second stage, and we will fix our thresholds in euros to be recalculated to hryvnias every year. So right now the threshold is approximately 2,000 euros for goods and services, 4,000 euros for current repairs, and 30,000 euros for works. That's where the changes introduced by the CMU resolution 1178, and actually the thresholds was a little raised comparing to what we had previously, because before the full-scale invasion, for the direct purchasing, we had the threshold for 1,000 euros for goods, for example. Also, this resolution allowed to use e-marketplace. Actually, in our legislation, it's called e-catalog, but we are changing that to e-marketplace because it has no similarities for e-catalog that you used for. It's a tool that avails contracting authorities to conduct RFPs or price quotations from the pre-qualified suppliers. So it's a slight modification of dynamic purchasing systems that we developed during the martial law and during the last couple of years. And e-marketplace right now is allowed for procurement of goods without any upper threshold. So if you conduct procurements of common goods, you can use e-marketplace from 2,000 euros till infinity. Also, this resolution allowed broader use of direct contracts without open tender or e-marketplace usage, significantly defined wartime cases under Article 13 of this resolution, and you can also, it's in public access, so you can find that resolution. I know a couple of people present in here today, they asked me about whether they can read this resolution to have their personal takeaways and maybe to adapt a national legislation drafts just in case of emergency. So we can share the link to this resolution in the chat later or with the materials of our presentation today. But right now we have a lot of exceptions for direct contracts, and the situation changes dramatically depending on the weather condition, depending on the electrical supply and so on. So we have some exceptions that allows contracting authorities to conduct direct contracts. For example, this winter and couple of winters before, we had a very enormous energy crisis and blackouts for 1 or 2 days without electricity for the household and contracting authorities and government authorities around Ukraine. So in those circumstances, for example, to purchase generators, you could use the direct contract without open tender. Such exemption was introduced. Also, this resolution preserved transparency by requiring publication in electronic system reports about every contract, what I already mentioned in the beginning, and kept the 24-hour correction mechanism for fixing certain bid inconsistencies, which reduced actually in the system unnecessary disqualifications of suppliers and helped to maintain competition under the pressure. So talking about results of such approach, the average duration of competitive procedures decreased 2 times to 23 days. From announcing the open tender to signing the contract, from 46 days that were before the invasion. 20% reduced of the unsuccessful procedures comparing what we had before the adoption of this decree of Cabinet of Ministry, and 300 amount of procedures via e-marketplace ProZorro Market increase. comparing to what we had before the adoption of this decree. So before the full-scale invasion and before the decree 1178, a Prozoro market was and e-marketplace was the tool for under the national threshold procurement. But we realized that in such uncertain circumstances, you can take leverage on what this instrument propose and what the instruments of centralized purchasing bodies propose. And right now for the commodities, for example, for the fuel, for the electricity, for food, 80–90% of the procurements, competitive procurements in Ukraine are done through e-marketplace that CPBs administer. For example, our CPB administered common goods. We have medical procurement in Ukraine as administrator for the medical supplies and medicines. And we have ICT CPB, who's in charge, of course, of the ICT procurements in that catalog. Actually, the resolution number 1178, it's not a fixed document, and it's a living framework that had a lot of iterations during the last couple of years. And we use that to develop and to fix something that wasn't work properly, and some issues there that were highlighted by the users, businesses, as well as contracting authorities. So at this slide, I provide just a couple of examples of iterative improvements driven by the real world feedback. For example, fixing of unnecessary disqualifications, later amendments to the resolution of Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine clarified that the 24 hours correction mechanism could be used for all documents covered by paragraph 43, helping to preserve competition instead of rejecting bids for fixable issues. Also, one example is tightening justification where flexibility created risk. For example, amendments in 2023 also focused on better substantiation of grounds for direct contracting, showing a move from emergency flexibility toward more disciplined wartime accountability, because as you can imagine, when the full-scale invasion became Ukrainian reality, a lot of contracting authorities took advantage of the justifications and signing direct contracts, and we need to modify our resolution to cut the loopholes from this legislation. Also, shifting repetitive demand into simpler tools, and I already mentioned e-marketplace. So 2 years after this resolution was adopted in 2024, the rules added mandatory e-marketplace procurement for certain food products, for medicine, and that was really pushing the burden from the contracting authorities to CPB, and routine purchases for smaller Ukrainian entities actually became faster and more standardized in the way, as well as the competition and median economy during that procurements really increased. And expecting marketplace logic where it worked. So last year, the government expanded the list of medicine and medical devices that had to be brought through e-marketplace, showing that successful solutions were scaled and not reinvented by the different procedures or different instruments. Also, right now, we have a strong cooperation with Ministry of Education in Ukraine, and we have a couple of projects funded by international donors to ensure that Ukraine keeps education in focus and improve the classrooms and in general improve school conditions so we can keep our children in the more or less normal environment when they're studying. So all the equipment for such programs needs to be procured by the e-marketplace because it's standardized, it's rather simple, and you can make it much faster when you're doing that. But a lot of procurement officials in Ukraine are really unhappy because of this iterative approach, because as of months ago, when I was preparing this presentation, the resolution 1178 had 49 revisions, and it's quite a lot for the procurement officials who need to adapt and need to read every amendment to this resolution to fix the tender documentation, to understand what actually changed. And private procurement consultants in Ukraine taking advantage of them because they can sell a lot of additional workshops and a lot of additional consultancy named, for example, how to prepare for new amendments, how to not put yourself in jail. So I don't know, you have pros and you have cons, but the feedback from customers, you're trying to improve their experience, you're trying to cut the loopholes, but some people will still be unhappy with how often you conduct those revisions. And actually, under martial law, procurement laws cannot remain silent. Maybe it's a key takeaway from that part, because the situation, the global situation, as well as situation in Ukraine, radically changed month after month. You can even see the signs of that in the European context. So you should modify and you should adapt to the circumstances as they are on a certain moment of time, because the situation in Ukraine not really changed in terms of how often we shelled and how often we face blackouts and cuts of electricity, but in reality the business environment and the government environment changed much more easily, so we need to adapt not only our mental condition but legislation as well. A little more about feedback and co-creation under Resolution 1178. So changes were shaped by a steady flow of questions from contracting authorities, suppliers, platform, procurement experts through consultation. So of course, before each amendments, Ministry of Economy as a policymaker in field of public procurement in Ukraine aggregated official requests, explanatory webinars to how to adapt to those changes, but still a lot of people are really unhappy that we have such large amount of amendments. Very practical example, it's a 24-hour correction mechanism that I mentioned earlier. So in practice, buyers and suppliers needed a way to avoid unnecessary rejection for fixable errors. For example, if someone forgot to download to the system one document or the document with the wrong data on it. For example, if you need to provide a document that ensures that you have no criminal record 30 days from the date of the tender, and you provided such document for 32 or 33 days because you constantly taking part in the tenders and maybe just misclicked on your computer and downloaded the wrong document. So you can easily change that, and by introducing that mechanism, the Prozoro later highlighted that more than 1,000 of entrepreneurs and businesses had already used it successfully in procurement, and that allowed better prices for the government, better prices for the contracting authorities, and avoided unnecessary exclusions from the procurement for businesses. Also, on the buyer side, European funded project EU4PFM conducted a capacity assessment and noted that many contracting authorities intensified pre-tender communication with suppliers during the martial law and the full-scale invasion, provided feedback to unsuccessful bidders because the competition right now in Ukrainian public procurement needs to be better, as we understand that. So it's a good sign that contracting authorities work more systematically to keep suppliers engaged in future tenders. And in response to a customer demand, centralized procurement bodies expanded the assortment of the available categories in e-marketplace from around 600 to more than 2,000 of product categories right now. We have a lot of requests from different contracting authorities, and sometimes right now it even became ridiculous because people realizing that they can use Simplify instrument want to conduct procurement of everything through e-marketplace. So we need to set our priorities right and focus on the categories of goods that are really relevant to the matter of standardization and to the matter of the total amount of money and total amount of procedures that we expect to be in such categories during the year. So the main lessons that the strengths of Ukrainian approach, not just in simplification of procurement, real strength was the ability to learn, adjust and correct the wrong decisions based on the live system feedback. And not only amendments in terms of legal side, but also digital developments in Prozoro system were happening over the last 4 years. So during this time, the system introduced e-complaints with online applying, online payment, and everyone in the system can view the entire appeal process. It made much more transparent and easy for both sides. And if the complaint is partially satisfied, the fee is refunded in full to the entity who provided the complaint. Also, right now, we, together with state-owned enterprise Prozoro, work on e-contracts. They're already available for the entire system. It's not a PDF, it's a data that can be generated to the PDF as well to any other format. And we have per category template that can be used by contracting authorities when announcing the tender, just filling the gaps in some contract field, making much more easier for the contracting authorities to prepare for the procurement as well as for auditors to monitor, because when contracting authorities use e-contract, it's a sign of transparency and compliant with the law behavior. It allows digital signatures only, and we working on e-contract constructor that will allow to combine different parts of data and to design electronic contract by the contracting authority by themselves. And also for state audit service, automated risk indicator appeals appeared in Prozoro. So if the procedure, for example, violated for defining the subject, it highlighted in the automated risk indicator cabinet, and tender documentation does not comply with the public procurement law, it does the same. As well as if deadline for disclosure is missed, that approach makes work of state audit service officials much efficient in terms of monitoring the procurement procedures in the system. So next, I wanted to focus on why transparency mattered even more during the war, and Nadiya provided really good examples with the procurements by the Ministry of Defense. And transparency right now helping to preserve trust in government purchasing, because when the country faced the critical situation, the war, for example, you need to build trust with the government and not allow any scandal and incompetence or maybe corruption from the government side to become unnoticed. It also allowed suppliers to seize opportunities and respond faster, because 3 or 4 months after the full-scale invasion, we registered a very huge increase of businesses' interest to enter the public procurement, because the whole market of Ukraine was limited, and public procurement and the government is the biggest buyer in the country. So businesses that previously were not willing to work with the government, they seek that as an opportunity for themselves, and transparency allowed them to see that opportunity as well and not be excluded. It also created a record for audit, review, and post-crisis learning. Actually, we wanted it to happen much earlier. So a couple of years ago, we were thinking that, well, in a couple of years, the war will end and we can analyze a lot of things that were happening in Ukraine, as well as procurements, but it's still going on. So right now, more than 4 years with the full-scale invasion, we understand that we need to continue, and without the audit and the review of the procurements, it's impossible to have efficient plans for the future. And it supported both domestic oversight and international partner confidence, and we are really happy that a lot of international financial institutions and donors are using ProZorro right now to conduct procurement by their rules, because over the last couple of years, ProZorro also created the constructor that can be used for international financial institutions to conduct procurement not in their systems, but using ProZorro. So those procurements are visible to everyone, and World Bank, for example, USAID, when they were present in Ukraine before Trump showed up, they were conducting their procurements in ProZorro system. But also the last part from myself, that the war has impact on daily operations of the country. So for example, its constant air attacks became part of operating reality. For example, right now, the huge drone attacks is in Ukraine, and over Kyiv we have more than 100 drones, as what I saw 40 minutes ago. Also, power outage directly affected procurement operations as well as any business operations in Ukraine. And of course, the war affected the workforce, because we have a mobilization of men to the army. So really workforce was reduced as well for businesses and for contracting authorities and for procurement officials, because a lot of women left the country, and a lot of men were mobilized to the armed force of Ukraine. So even the World Bank and OECD noted that mobilization strengthens the male workforce and worsened labor shortages, creating operational constraints across sectors and pushing wages higher where shortages were the most acute. So to find the appropriate people to conduct the job right now, as I can imagine, is complicated for almost every country, but in Ukraine, it's really extreme circumstances to conduct procurement with professional people. And finally, what, in my opinion, our Ukrainian experience teaches. 3 core lessons that I wanted to highlight. First one is that coordination matter between stakeholders as much as regulation. Second is simplification works only when paired with transparency and digital tools. Not only simplification and introduction of direct purchases without using of any e-procurement system, and policy must be iterative, because a lot of things change months after month, so you cannot fix the law and the public procurement procedures and instruments on the even yearly basis. You need to adapt that, responding to the situation in different sectors of economy, and of course responded to the situation on the battlefield. So that's all from my side. Thank you for attention. Thank you for being here today and supporting Ukraine. Thank you very much.